Okay, so good morning, everyone, and from lockdown Sydney, if you're in Sydney, or Melbourne, if you're in Melbourne. For anyone in the other states, then half your luck. But welcome to our webinar this morning from Pendula and Cloudwerx. I'm your host, Alex Train. I'm the COO and CRO of Pendula, and I'd like to welcome you to this morning's webinar, Transform Your Digital Strategy to Increase Student Admissions and Retention. We're here today to shine some light on a wonderful success story that we've had and the experience of our education guests and how they've focused on students and driving positive outcomes from them and for their organizations. Before we get started, just a small piece of housekeeping. We will be having a Q&A panel later in the webinar, and you can actually ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the window. So please feel free to submit those as we go through the webinar, and we'll be sure to try to get to those at the very end, at the end of the webinar. Okay, let's get into it. So today's webinar is brought to you by Pendula and Cloudwerx. And just a little bit of an overview, Pendula is a student engagement platform, and it allows you to create two-way conversations with your students. It is our mission to give the power to make it easy to engage with students throughout their life cycle, from enrollment right through to graduation. As you can see on the screen, we've got an animated representation of Pendula. What it does is it actually provides educators with a drag and drop interface to configure and control how you'd like conversations with your students to behave. And it is built specifically so that no developers are needed to get your ideas automated and out there into the market and into action. So before we go any further, I thought I'd talk a little bit about why engagement with students is so important. So working through the industry for the last few years, we've actually arrived at a bit of insight of what we've learned through working with various different institutions. So number one, your students do want to talk to you. Through using things like conversational SMS, we've actually found that over 30% of students will actually respond to digital conversations, and they'll voluntarily provide unprompted feedback. And we've learned that whilst we know they live on their phones, they also see being called as sometimes can be intrusive. So reaching out to them via channels like SMS is actually a really effective way to give them a voice and to listen to their feedback. So point number two is that what they have to say can be really valuable. You can enrich the data that you have about your students, and you can take advantage of the untapped opportunities that arise from them directly engaging with you and your organization. Number three, if you make it easy for them, then you can get results. So students being able to actually respond to you and interact can actually translate into positive action, such as converting enrollments and keeping those students on track to graduate. The ability to embrace experience is a key differentiator, and engaging with students on a channel where they already are will allow you to stand out and be a student experience-oriented institution. So between Pendula, Cloudwerx, and MCI, we've come together here today to arrive at some of these insights gained by operating where education and technology meet. We've invited our guests, and we're here to discuss some of these topics for a bit of a fireside chat on this cold winter's morning. So it is my pleasure to introduce formally our guests this morning. And first we have MCI Solutions. MCI are a multi-award winning training and education provider. They offer learning and qualification solutions to corporates, government, and individuals across Australia. And joining us from MCI, we're pleased to have CEO Jenna Baskin. Welcome, Jenna, and lovely to see you.
Always lovely to see you, Alex.
Thank you. Also joining us, we have our friends at Cloudwerx. And Cloudwerx are a technical services consulting company, and they have a special focus on the education sector. Cloudwerx assists institutions in selecting and implementing a variety of technologies, such as Pendula, and they help organizations manage their businesses using that tech. Please meet CEO Toby Wilcock. Great to see you, Toby.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, good to see you too, champ, and thanks for having me.
I wish we could have done it in person to both of you. Ordinarily we do webinars in our office, and it would have been great to be sat on a couch with you, but the technology allows us to do it anyway. So welcome both, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Alex.
So knowing that lots of the attendees here today, that you're working through all different types of problems within your businesses and different challenges, I thought I'd actually start off by focusing on that most important thing, which is some of the problems that you were looking to solve when you started out in your digital initiatives. So Jenna, would you like to start us off by taking us through what exactly you were trying to solve?
Yeah, definitely. So welcome everyone. Definitely also sitting here in lockdown in Sydney and loving it as much as I can. So from the MCI perspective, we actually have 3 brands in the market. And I think that's quite important just to differentiate, because I know there's people from education in general on this webinar, but sometimes looking after different types of clients. So we have a business that looks after our B2B and B2G clients that has their own challenges, and they mainly do non-accredited training. We have our MCI Institute, which looks after individual students that are usually paying out of their own pockets, so studying a Certificate 3, Certificate 4, or a diploma online, which for anyone that's done online study, irrespective of your background, is a big challenge. And then our third brand is MCI Achieve, where we partner with government and job services providers to offer Certificate 3 programs to job seekers trying to get into the workplace. And so for us, that was the greatest challenge that we needed to tackle pretty head on, pretty quickly. And it wasn't because of the types of students, and I know people have some stereotypes perhaps of somebody looking for a job and trying to better their lives, and I can assure you I can shatter most of those stereotypes. But for us, it was the pure mass of people and students that was our biggest challenge. And that's not to say that automation and digitization and fun interactive conversations doesn't need to take place with corporates and governments and individuals, but our students that were being referred to us from job services providers were our biggest challenge at the time. In terms of scale, you're talking, we were onboarding 50, and we are currently onboarding about 50 students a day. So it's a lot, and they have to study with us for 6 months, and they have very strict criteria of what they need to achieve in terms of hours, a number of questions answered. And so even if I had all the money in the world and all the people in the world, which for anyone that recruits in Australia knows that's quite difficult, especially at the moment, there is no way that in real time we could give these students the data that they needed, and our customer who referred them to us the data that they needed to keep up to date with all the KPIs. As well as that, as we all know, it's very challenging when you take students from regional or rural parts of Australia, or even some of the major cities, to try and encourage people not to procrastinate and to get online and to do their online studies. It's quite difficult, and there needs to be that constant communication. So for us, that was really the biggest challenge of making sure that we met our KPIs, helped them meet their requirements, and all in all got people to finish their course and hopefully get a job at the end.
Very good. Yeah. So, I mean, dealing with lots and lots of students and all at different stages of their interaction with you, trying to make it feel natural to engage with you guys, and ultimately to get them to get right through that funnel is that's very challenging. I can totally imagine. Toby, I was having a little bit of think about some of those types of problems, and I know that you come across a lot of similar themes in the problems that you come across as you work with and consult with educators. What kinds of problems are you coming across when you work with these people?
Yeah, it's and look, Cloudwerx actually came from the education space, right? The founders know this space at depth, and really what we wanted to do and what we were seeing is that we wanted to kind of really cut to the chase. What's keeping folks up at night? How do we approach this this sector as well with the tech can do it, but how do we go about doing that and really hone in on the things that matters? Like how do I reduce these costs and be more productive and enhance growth? How do I innovate with the team that I've got, empowering them and so forth, and then all of this sort of comes to communicating to the student, the member. I mean, we're seeing across all industries, how do you bring it to their channel and with the changing state of digital at the moment. So yeah, we're obviously seeing a lot of hard problems out there, but at the end of the day, we were kind of cutting back to the real crux of the problem and trying to get to the heart of some of these processes and issues right up front, early on. And I think that's kind of key, is to not sort of it can be a bit all consuming, but really if you kind of hone in on start small but thinking big, then and keep chipping away, that's when you're going to get some results. And also sort of having some guiding principles up front too about pragmatic approach to what you've got on your plate, what's coming, and how do we chip away at that. That was, that's a lot of sort of where we've come from and how we've adapted, knowing that, the industry side of things, but then the consulting side of it, and implementation and adoption of all this tooling as well.
Yeah, I mean, having origins in the education industry yourselves, it places you really well to identify some of these big questions that people are working through and problems they're trying to solve.
That's right. And look, at the end of the day, the organization, they know their process, they know the industry like more than anybody, right? Let's be honest, day to day.
Yeah.
But that the empathy that we can that we focus on, having done that, but also kind of bridging that. How do we get to that point? That's great. We've got all this tooling, we've got all this stuff that we need to do, and all these constraints. But what is the path that's going to take us there? And I guess we'll talk a bit more about that in this webinar as well. Our approach.
Yeah, how to execute. Yeah, great point. And I mean, holding these problems in mind, and dealing with scaling and tools and tasks and all that sort of stuff. There's plenty there to wrestle with. It seems like you determined that in order to address them, you obviously needed to focus on systems and bring some of that automation and so on into your organization. Maybe back to you, Jenna. Jenna, tell me, how did bringing tech into the mix start to help solve these problems?
Yeah, definitely. I think, first of all, the math doesn't add up. So, adding more bodies and people to the problem that isn't always the solution. And that's not to say we have an army of people that are still ready and able to help people that don't want to engage fully on text all the time, because that's not the mode and method for everyone. But really for us, it was, how do we get into the hands of our customers as fast as possible and hear from them as fast as possible? So not everyone studies 9 to 5. Not everyone is studying when you have a team on board. Not everyone is signing up to your course. Not everyone is trying to troubleshoot or problem solve or re-energize and ignite their passion for learning when you have a team on board at 9 to 5. So that was one thing that we saw straight away just by looking at the data and the statistics on our websites and on our different platforms. Most of our students were studying at night and on weekends, and as much as we could resource for that, it wasn't enough. The other thing that we really noticed, and I'll probably give the cherry on the top a bit too early in my presentation, but we set pretty strict KPIs internally for our teams, and our customers have set those for us as well. The quicker we know, the quicker we can get somebody to log in to their course and onto their platform, the quicker they're going to progress and the more likely they are to finish. And so to get people to sit there calling and trying to engage somebody to log into their course, maybe they're working, maybe they're looking after kids or grandkids, maybe they're out and about, you miss them, it's a random 02 or 03 or 07 number. How many of those do we get that we never answer? Yeah. And so it's just everything got pushed out. And so for us, we went by just giving the data and information to people in real time, in their hands, in their world, we were able to go from 54% of people logging on within the first 7 days, which was our KPI, up to 89%. So that was a huge jump. The bigger jump for us and the KPI that we had set was making sure that people are proactively doing their course regularly. So as soon as we saw that people were taking 2, 3, 4 weeks between logging on and doing the course, it's like any one of you in your roles or with kids, it's a snowball effect. Once you start procrastinating, it just becomes too big. You walk away, it's everyone else's sort of fault. And then your mentors or your tutors are left to pick up the damage. And so for us, we knew if we could consistently remind people, and it's not just stick language all the time, it's carrot language as well, but consistently get them to log in and do a few hours a day or a few hours a week, we knew that we have a higher likelihood of completing. And so for us, which is probably the biggest selling point of why we were stuck in Pendula and going deeper into other brands, is our competitors were getting 25% of people logging on regularly each week, and we're getting 82%. So it's a massive, massive gap, and our customers are obviously very happy with our progression rates, and people, the satisfaction rates as well have gone through the roof. And for us, really, when we look at that challenge of throwing technology and systems into the mix, we have a lot of competitors out there. I'm sure many of them are sitting on this webinar at the moment. And really, when you put yourself truly in the shoes of a student, not just pretend, but truly put yourself in the shoes of a student, you have your different personas. We have our working students, we have our single mothers trying to return to the workforce, we have our unemployed students, we have those that somebody at work told them they had to do this course, and everyone's got their own different mission and motives for being there. And for us, it was how do we get the knowledge and know-how into their hands when they need it? Not when we're available, not when somebody in our call center can answer their question and not to their satisfaction or to their satisfaction, not that they have to sit on a waiting line while they're trying to do their emails. It's how do we get it into their hands? And as I said, not everyone wants that, but you're talking, irrespective of generational differences, you're talking well over 90% of our students are using text message rather than calling. And many may start text messaging and then go to a call if it's a bit more complicated. But we know and we can see in the data that a lot of our students are engaging purely with reminders and real-time data. So for that, for us, was a huge consideration. And really, whenever we piloted, it was all tied back to KPIs. What is in the best interest of the student? What do we need to do? What do we need to achieve? And then how do we replicate that in other parts of our brands is sort of the journey that we're going on at the moment.
I mean, first of all, an amazing uptick in conversion rate and getting those students to move through. That's pretty remarkable. But I think something you said there stood out to me. It's having a really clear plan and how you're trying to do that, having your goals, and then establishing, exactly the process through which. And technology is an enabler. It's not all about the tech itself. Although we as a tech company often like to think so, it's absolutely about bringing the parts together. So, I mean, congrats on such great results. I'm glad your customers are really happy. I'm sure they'll continue to be. Having a little bit of a think, sort of beyond that a little, I guess, Toby, with the way that you consult with educators, what are you seeing with regards to what is effective when bringing tech into the conversation?
Yeah, excuse me. I think 100%. There's so many cool things that we can get out of the technology once it's set up and you've got the platforms in place. But to take it a couple of steps back, to your point, Janet, you need to have that kind of strategy up front of view of like, okay, what are the guiding principles here, right? What are the things that we really, really need to focus on all the way along this path, and define them up front, right? So that every time you're kind of making decisions along the path, that you kind of go back going, does that support the overarching, direction, strategy, whatever that? So getting that defined up front is critical, and doing a bit of planning, and then the work up front to before you kick off, but not thinking, okay, we've got to smash this all out in one go. Definitely, it's about starting small and getting started. Just same with me going to the gym, sort of stuff. Just get out there, right? Getting out there is the first step. So we across the years, we've seen all sorts of different ways of cutting to the chase and doing some of this planning. But for us, what's really effective, really quick across any process is this service blueprint design that I bang on about quite a bit. Actually, it's really effective for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's cutting to the chase of where is the real problem here, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen while the world still ticks along, while you're wanting to sort of uplift some of the things you want to do with technology. But how do we quickly get to the crux of the problem, map out exactly what the process is, and then 9 times out of 10 Salesforce will be the solution in part of this and the technologies. But there's other things in there that could actually move the needle as well, that we see that we can go, okay, hang on a minute, some training over here might be what you need to do first and foremost. So blueprinting is really strong. We do it at the beginning of any sort of pre-sales or any process and that sort of stuff. And then, because it's not just the journey of that student and so forth, it's all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, right? And the sort of surface to core, all the folks who are interacting with the systems, and how many touch points are there being from one interaction from the student to the other. So this approach is something that we've adopted, been around for a while, but it's something that we found is very effective for both the as is state and then moving to that to be state. And then you see all these opportunities for automation and efficiency and so forth. the knock-on effect for this one too was that we were using this as a process of implementing and consulting, but the empathy that we can extract and see the users that are dealing with the students and all that sort of stuff gives us way more insight to be able to provide the right solutions at the right time. So yeah, thank you very much for the next slide. That empathy is super important, right? Because if the person is suffering in this process, right, the whole customer experience goes out the door, and that's again where people process tech, is where our focus is. But then also, how does what we're looking at this process, how does that affect other upstream and downstream departments, right? And the knock-on effect that has. So this gives that really good, great team alignment. Team alignment, even from the executives being able to see what's going on at that process level rapidly and kind of going, ooh, is that actually how we do things here? And team alignment, because one person does a process one way, but I'm telling you, there'll be three others that do it differently, doing the same thing. So bringing that together, and again with this, we see actionable insights, quick tactical stuff, and then bigger kind of strategic, plays that we can kind of go, all right, that's something we need to tackle. So it's sort of we see it obviously in the education space, but across a lot of industries. You show me a process, I'll show you a little bit of blueprinting that can fix that.
Yeah, it's
I'm not too salesy on this.
That's all good. I think thinking back to where Jenna was talking about her problems and like throwing people at the problem doesn't always solve it. It is that combination of people, process, and systems, and that service blueprinting. I mean, there's pretty colors and post-it notes and all that kind of fun stuff in the process, but it's actually very practical too. It's really hands-on. You bring in all the stakeholders around the business, and I've seen some great photographs of stuff that your teams do. So
it's sort of like we've seen a bunch of stuff over the years and trying to kind of not consult like our parents did, if my parents did consult, but taking those little bits and pieces that work and actually what artifacts are we creating, what sort of documentation too that you want to kind of keep along the way that actually adds value, as opposed to a PowerPoint.
And people on this call, they'll be coming to these problems at all levels of maturity. Some will be very early and trying to understand where they're at, and may or may not have a lot of process around how they are looking to resolve it. So having a great framework to figure that out is that's needed big time, right? Okay, so just moving on a little, and thanks both for talking through some of the problems both that you've faced personally as well as things that you've helped others solve, and the ways in which you've addressed them as well. Absolutely. Now we know tackling these initiatives is difficult, and good outcomes come with useful lessons, of course. Look, to help out some of our webinar attendees, what are some of the really key lessons that you've both learned along the way? We might start back with you, Jenna.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've got some funny lessons that I've learned, but let's start bigger and we'll go to the funny after that. So I guess for us, a few of the lessons that we learned is dive in soon. You can sit there planning for a long time, and analysis paralysis affects every business, affects every person, affects every part of your business. Once you've made the decision to go head first, just dive in. Even if you start small, and for us, we really did start small. The first thing that we did was make sure that we can get login details to people, which sounds so silly, but we sent login details via SMS rather than email. The number of spam filters that weren't picking it up, it was going to people's junk mails. People were like, oh, I'll get to it. And, you open an email and then it goes deep into your inbox and you never see it again. But when it's an SMS, it's quite easy. I can search password and there it was, and huge changes. So we started small. We did map things out, probably not to the extent that Toby was talking about. And again, in hindsight, maybe, all the lessons that I have learned, we would have spent a little bit longer mapping things out and not just trialing and failing and testing and keeping on moving. But I guess really what I say to my team is, what else can we be doing? Challenge and question everything. So looking at the student journey right from the beginning all the way till they graduate and hopefully come back to potentially study with us again, which is a huge motive of one of the pilots that we're looking at the moment, is they inquire with you whether you're a Cricos provider coming through an agent, or whether you're a domestic student or a corporate client. If they're inquiring with you, unless they came with a really fantastic recommendation, they're probably inquiring with 4 or 5 others of your competitors. And so looking at that, okay, how can we do that better? How can we be better than our competitors? And not in terms of, I want to beat them, but I want to help the student faster with more relevant information, ease of process, make them feel comfortable. Signing up to education is a very difficult decision for many, many people, whether it's forced upon you or not. It's quite a challenge, and many people haven't studied since school. And so looking at that and breaking it down, and it's not just your senior executives that know the answers. It was astounding when we went to talk to our call center, when we went to talk to our sales team, our administrators. What are your pain points? What are you seeing? Just spill it all out on the table. You start hearing stories of, did you know that we're actually receiving 16 to 17 calls a day just on this one problem? Oh, okay. Well, how many people aren't calling us with that problem is the first question. And then if we can make that more of a conversation and get it in their hands at 4 in the morning or 12 o'clock at night when we're not there, how many more people can we help? So really for us, it's breaking down those problems and trying to find solutions that are more accessible to people in real time. I guess for us, in terms of the future ahead and all the lessons that we've learned, and probably 2 of the funniest ones that come to mind is, first of all, Pendula is a very easy platform. Even I can use it, and people laugh in my team when I tell them I'll just send a Pendula message, and they're like, just let somebody who's got more practice do it. But I do it. But the first thing, it wasn't a mistake I made, but somebody else in my team, and we still laugh about it, set it to PM, not AM, 11 PM, not 11 AM for the message to go out. And we had some angry students. It did wake them up and engage them in their course, but it was a lesson that we learned one day, and we had to send an apology. The other one, which I thought was just quite funny, because we have to send for a certain cohort of students how many hours they've studied in a week and how many more hours they have to go. And somebody changed the calculation in Salesforce, and so it went out with, let's say Toby had 7 hours to go. For whatever reason, it was calculating 7.11752. It had 12 decimal points. And so these SMSs were going out, and people were like, oh, that's fantastic. And suddenly they woke up. So always check that in terms of your pilot and testing. But really, in terms of the future ahead for us, once we've got the automation, once we've got the connection and the platform, it was a one-off setup for us. And I'm sure everyone's a little bit different in how they engage with Cloudwerx or Pendula or Salesforce or whatever it is. It was a one-off setup for us. And now we manage it internally, and it's all about piloting. So we've got a small group of people internally that know really how to use Pendula. And obviously the help and support is always amazing when we do get stuck. But they're just saying, okay, here's a small cohort of students with this challenge. How do we fix it? How do we put more of a carrot in place for them to get moving? How do we get progression? How do we get them to come back if they've graduated? So all of these things for us are really, how do we just keep that momentum going? How do we keep the satisfaction and the happiness, but also the challenge? We don't want students to walk out feeling that was an easy course, but we don't want the experience to be the thing that they remember as painful. We want the challenge of learning to be something that stretched them, not, I couldn't get hold of anyone, this was terrible, this experience was horrible, it reminded me of school, my teacher used to yell at me all the time, and I'm never doing education again. So I think those are a couple of things from us.
Great. Yeah, I mean, you always remember how somebody or some organization you interact with, how it makes you feel, right? So really, and it's kind of proof positive there that that kind of a channel like SMS, it gets to them. So you need a little bit of rigor around, how who's controlling stuff and sending it out, and a little bit. There's some lessons there for example, how you do the blueprinting and figure out how you introduce a bit of governance around these kinds of tools. So a couple of great lessons. It's always fun to get a reminder at 11 PM that you haven't logged in. So I'm sure you got some choice words back, but
fortunately, Pendula allows us to block those choice words. But yeah,
a couple of funny lessons and some good practical ones too. And Toby, yourself, what kinds of lessons have you guys been seeing and learning along the way?
Well, yeah, I mean, back when we kicked off, And I think to your point of like trying to get it to where it's, these are students and so forth, but they don't feel like they're back at school, right? And they're working with technology that helps. It's it's frictionless and all that sort of stuff, and that's really important. And that sort of some of the challenges early on haven't changed really. That sort of their expectations and reaching them at their channel and all of that sort of stuff. It's still there, and it's even and really those challenges have just intensified because of the pandemic and all that sorts of stuff, and just general youth expectations, right? And keeping up with that. But for us, I think where we focus on is going. Data is a super important thing. And getting the platform stitched together with key systems that you just can't get away from, like student management systems and learning management systems, right? And being pragmatic about where we've got to live with that. We can't get it all into Salesforce. We'd love to, but that maybe that's coming down the track. But getting those systems stitched together, get the data, so there you have that information for actionable insights along the way, and really seeing the value of the whole life cycle of the student right through to the alumni, which back at Ivy College when it all kicked off, that circle of life was incredible, and it was really powerful. And that comes with having all that information in sort of that platform approach and a layer of engagement. So that's kind of still a real driver for us, is that single view of the student, the platform, keeping it agile, keeping it pragmatic to what you can achieve. But like you said, Jenna, just get on with it, get started, get moving. Really, the people again, and who's going to be owning certain things along the way. As far as that platform, we want folks to be fully independent when we've set them up, got them on the way. You're only coming back to us if there's a another major piece of work or a little bit of helping hand here and there. Establishing those folks within the business, and also the knock-on effect of that, of having great technology and stuff that's actually good fun to use, is that you attract awesome talent and retain awesome talent in the organization, and they go on to do all sorts of amazing things too that we've seen across the organizations we've worked with, and even folks back in the beginning of Ivy College and where they've gone to. So that the future's bright. Actually, in some ways, the pandemic has forced the hand of a lot of stuff that we've been sort of saying, hey, well, you've been able to do this for some time now. Let's just crack on. But I think the key challenges remain the same, about retention and attraction, all that sort of stuff.
A couple of really good points there, actually, Toby. I love that comment there, which I hadn't thought of too much, although I was aware of it. But bringing the skills into your organization and attracting great people because you're using cool technology and that attracts them as part of it. That's fascinating. Of course, lots of systems. There's a little nugget of very good advice there. Don't try and bring everything together. Don't try and overboil the complexity. Keep it simple. Start small. Work agile. Let it seed and grow. Those kind of little lessons. Yeah, thank you. Really good lessons, actually. Okay, and as we know, in the education sector, we're going through a pandemic. There's plenty going on. Let's be honest. Lots of change. Jenna, to you, as you look to the future, what kind of trends are you seeing emerge in the market and that you're preparing for?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's sometimes I wish my crystal ball will quickly arrive from Amazon that I ordered 18 months ago. I guess for us, I know there's a lot of CRICOS providers on this webinar. We fortunately or unfortunately sold our CRICOS colleges prior to the pandemic. And so I think from a CRICOS perspective, education is one of Australia's largest exports, and especially after the pandemic, I think there's going to be a big shift in that. There are a lot of people that still value an Australian education, and I think we're going to see, on one hand, an influx of people trying to get back in, but on the other hand, also it's going to be quite challenging for people to move and potentially a fight for students. So I think that's one thing, and it's going to be the experience and what's going to make Australia better than the US or Canada or the UK. In terms of what's happening in our industry, we're definitely seeing some changes, especially when it happens a downturn of economy, as we saw in 2007-8, and as we're seeing now, there is a lot of government funding floating around in education. And so that is always an adaptive change that education providers have to work with. On one hand, it's a blessing having government funding because it does open up the opportunities for everyone to have an education and to upskill themselves. And we definitely, from our perspective, saw as the pandemic hit, some people were sort of lost their jobs and furloughed, and other people just started panicking and started thinking, well, I haven't upgraded my education in 10, 15, 20 years, and maybe I should do that in case something happens. I think people are a little bit more comfortable now, but we're definitely seeing the continuation of a lot of government funding, which changes people's perception. When you're not forking out a lot of your own cash, it does make it quite difficult to get people to progress. And I think it's really going to come down to the battle of providers in you offer a certificate for, or a diploma or a bachelor, and it's the same as the guy or girl down the road. What makes yours different? And I can shop around now. I'm a lot more informed and have opinions. People love going on Google and Facebook and reading reviews and those sorts of things. And I guess the other thing that I'm seeing, which probably isn't as relevant to this market and to the attendees, but really from our side in corporate education, we're seeing a lot less focus on these multi-day or multi-week long programs and a lot more real-time micro-credentials. So what can I get my employees who are sitting at home at the moment in lockdown, or even when they're back in the office or in a hybrid workforce, how do I make them more productive? There's a big fight for talent in Australia for anyone that is employing at the moment. It is very, very difficult, and Toby touched on that a little bit. Interestingly, we've hired 2 interns recently that were attracted by a lot of the automation and the differences that we're bringing to the education, because they wanted to work in a corporate environment. They didn't want to quite work at a startup, but they wanted to have the experience of tech and cool student journeys. And for us, really what we're seeing is a lot smaller, more condensed, targeted programs that people can pick up and say, okay, I can learn, not just do an Excel 2-day course, but I can learn VLOOKUPs, pivot tables, whatever, in 90 minutes. Somebody will teach me and I go back into my job and I'm more productive. There's also, I think, across the gamut, and I know I'm rambling on here, but I've really been thinking about this for 18 months. We're seeing a huge shift and change across the different parts of the education spectrum in universities, Cricos providers, private education providers, TAFEs, non-accredited training providers, looking after not just the hard skills of, I'll teach you to be better at retail or leadership and management or accounting or whatever it is, but also the soft skills, and especially mental health and resilience. And that's become a very, very big topic, and something that we give, for example, to students is an online resilience course, which has nothing to do with them getting their qualification. But for us, if you don't have the skills and resilience and the ability to deal with all the craziness that's been happening in the last 18 months and the craziness that happens when you're trying to get your course done or when you're trying to get a job or whatever it is, that piece of paper is one thing, but it's not going to be as useful if you can't go out and put that into action. So I think that's going to be a big differentiator, especially in the universities. And one of our sibling companies is a mental health training provider, and they're working very closely with some universities on how to better equip staff on how to assist people with mental health and resilience and stress management.
So a couple of really big points there. Maybe just try and wrap a couple of those ideas up. Plenty coming down the pipe. There's going to be a lot of students coming back to Australia after travel's opened up again. So being prepared to compete for those students, and things like differentiating on the experience of interacting with your education institution is going to be key, as well as the quality of the content you produce, as well as those little things like how do you better equip these students, like the mental resilience thing. It's a great example. Anyone on this call who that your organization is interested in that training, please, we'll pass on Jenna's details if you'd like to connect to MCI and train up your staff on that sort of thing. Great points, Jenna. Toby, just over to you. You're obviously at the forefront of current technology as well as some new stuff that is not as well known. Like, you obviously work around the Salesforce and you help with Pendula, but I know you do some stuff around things, creative, cool things like UiPath. I'm kind of interested in what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, look, it's and I can't add much more around that, the market side of things that Jenna said. Look, just to add to that, there's a lot of stuff going on, and some of those key drivers are still there, but there's some big shifts as well. It's like we've got to do more with less, right? Fundamentally, and folks who are able to nail that and like strategies that Jenna is talking about is we help make that reality, right? But how do you do more with less, retain that customer experience, and then we've sort of got a bit of a special sauce around combining Salesforce with UiPath and robotic process automation, MuleSoft for that matter. But it's not about jamming tech in. It's about using what's right in that process. And I think there's some stuff to watch around RPA. If anyone wants to look up that, it's not a hospital. It's actually robotic process automation. That really also, again, back to the employee experience, they're not going, oh, this is just the worst process and job I've got to work through. I can automate some of that sort of stuff and get back to more the human things that I want to be doing or should be doing. Employee satisfaction goes up, customer satisfaction goes up, and it's that beautiful knock-on effect. So again, we're a human-centric tech company. At the end of the day, it's people at the center of all of this, and not losing sight of that. So I think, with the challenge of hiring, for us, even attracting talent, or for the folks we're working with talent, it's getting the human, or the human element back into the process of what we're where we're working and so forth. So that's got to always come back to it, and not sort of overcomplicating things too, right? I think we can get caught up on some of this stuff that doesn't need to be so complex, and kind of in a nutshell.
Ever the pragmatist, Toby. That's good advice. Yeah. Okay. Well,
anyway,
no, neither does mine. So thank you both. Some really good insight, and actually some really good advice amongst all of that too. Really appreciate it. Very insightful. I can see. I've got a background working in the education sector as well. I'd see all three of us were very interested in driving great student outcomes. And particularly with your business, Jenna. We thought we might now switch things up a little bit. Opportunity for these questions from the audience members, and anyone who hasn't yet submitted any, please feel free. There's a Q&A button down the bottom. We've got a little bit of time up our sleeves, so we'll be working through a few of those, and we'll give a few moments just to let some of those trickle in. Okay. I have a question here. Jenna, did you review other platforms, and what stood out to you when you were looking at Pendula?
Yes, in short, we did. So a couple of things for us. First of all, for anyone that does have government contracts that are quite restrictive of where your data needs to live, it is quite surprising that there are not many competitors out there that have all of their data that lives in Australia, and Pendula does. And so even before I saw their platform, that was a winning ticket for me, because we really struggled to find some sort of an SMS, not just an SMS platform, because there's a lot out there that you can just blast SMSs out, but something that had some sort of an automation and triggers that could rely not on humans but on the system to work, and there weren't that many. But in terms of actually analyzing Pendula and the use case for it, I guess for us, one of the key things about it was that ability to automate with the different hooks, and we don't need IT involved. So for anyone that doesn't know, so MCI is actually part of a much larger multinational company called APM, and we have a wonderful IT team who are absolutely fantastic, but we are one of, I think we're now 18 companies in the large brand. And so to get anything done, you have to plan quite well in advance. And so for us, that was one key thing, as well as that, for those of you that, receive these random daily or weekly SMSs from brands trying to sell things to you. I get YouFoods, for example, all the time. they mix up the conversation, but it's not really tailored to me. It's not really tailored to what I've ordered in the past. It's not really encouraging me or enticing me besides just discounts to buy. And the only outcome I can do is click on the link and buy or reply stop. Whereas in these situations, for us, we wanted to appear, and I'm continually shocked as to how many people reply, is this a real person? We wanted people to feel like they were having a real conversation. That's really what stood out to us about Pendula.
That's really, I heard you mention obviously the APM as part of the broader group. I have a question. How important has it been to find solutions that allow scale, particularly into the other parts of your group or your parent, into the broader organization?
Yeah, I think for us, each business is different. Not everyone has a CRM and not everyone uses Salesforce. I guess for us in terms of scale, so one part of our business that we have deployed Pendula fully in is looking after at any one point in time anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 students. And so that can scale up and scale down, and we have a very small staff number that looks after those students. And so that for us was really important. In terms of other parts of our business that are a little bit more hands-on and a bit more, I guess, premium in terms of their experience, we do have more employees that look after students that need tutorial sessions or help. But for us, again, that scalability, we can't just keep adding more people. And so for us, we needed to make sure all of our students live in Salesforce, all of our students live in between two LMSs that are connected to Salesforce. And for us, that was critical because as soon as that data is in there, you can scale it from 10 students to 10 million. Obviously, you have to pay Pendula a little bit more for that, but it's completely scalable and we don't need more than one person managing that process, whether it was 10 students or 10 million.
Okay, yeah, very, very good answer. I have a question, which kind of an extension of that a little. What were the advantages of not necessarily having IT involved in getting something like this up and running?
So I shouldn't discount IT entirely. They were definitely very helpful in the beginning, and I'm sure probably drove the Pendula team mad with all their pen tests and security checks and all that fun stuff. But once we had ticked that off and received sign off, I guess for us, they did assist us in the beginning because I have an absolutely lovely and fantastic team, but I wouldn't call them IT specialists. And so they did assist us in sort of being involved in the training and then handing over to the business slowly. So as our comfort and confidence levels lifted, they would maybe watch our team prepare some conversations within Pendula, roll it out, pilot it, see if there were any glitches, then maybe they would do another one. And now we're at the point where people in my team are onboarding and training new people without IT being involved. So I guess for us, in terms of the advantage, you're not relying on a team that should be doing probably more important things than trying to help us. And the beauty of this platform is you don't need to have a tech mind to be able to do it. There's no coding, there's no complex, once the integrations are built, have fun and enjoy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. IT are really important. You want to use them and have them focus on the things that, are really important, like making sure that the technology is secure, it's sovereign, for example, in your industry, that it's going to scale when it needs to. And then things like setting up how the communications behave, that's sort of best left to the people who are responsible for that business process, giving them that tool for what its purpose is. So very good. A couple of questions for you, Toby. Don't want to leave you hanging there.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. These types of projects, typically, how big are they? How much do they cost? How long is a piece of string? Yeah.
They're actually, getting Pendula in is, like Jenna said before, it's not actually a massive business model for Cloudwerx in the sense of services, if I can put it that way. It's very quick to get in, and again, that's why it's so good, is that it's in there, it's triggering off everything that's in Salesforce, and away you go, kind of thing. So that sort of stuff, it can start off really small. It really does. It's kind of relative. If I can answer the question that way, it's relative to if we're looking at a whole process and we kind of blueprint something, and a blueprinting session might be 90 minutes, right, to get that as is state. From there, it could be any number of types of engagements, size of implementations, or services, consulting there. But the bottom line with all of this is that we get a very quick handle on, okay, well, if we do this, it's going to save you X amount of FTE or whatever it might be, where they could be redeployed on something else or whatever. Engagements, it's a hard one to answer, but they, there can be a few weeks, it can be a few days or whatever, across the board. But we kind of split it across advisory, the actual implementation of and build, if you will, configuring, and then support afterwards if need be.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, whenever you ask a consulting organization how big, how complex, the answer is almost always it depends. So, yeah. But
just to add, actually, with the UiPath stuff that we're doing, there's ROI analysis that we can do if we gather the kind of fundamental data points. We plug that in. This is what this process is costing you right now with the people and the systems. If we do this, it will reduce to X, and you'll get a return in year 1, year 2, and so forth. So that sort of stuff we're doing in all of our consulting as we kick off any engagement.
Nice. Thank you. I have one last one here for you, Jenna. How do you think that conversational communications will help you to compete and to prepare, and how to go to market, really, the conversational side?
Yeah, definitely. So just quickly back to your question, because it's a question I always have for consultants like Toby, is how expensive is this going to be? Just reflecting on our journey, getting the data into Salesforce, which starting from scratch is always easier. When you're building on top of a legacy system is sometimes a bit more difficult. That was probably the biggest cost to us. Once we had got all the different data points that we needed into Salesforce, the beauty of Pendula is it's quite easy to connect those specific fields to the Pendula platform, and then you can pull and trigger based on all of them. But getting it in and getting that right from the beginning is always quite difficult. And as Toby says, everyone has to have a learning management system, everyone has to have a student management system, and all the other fun stuff. So just getting that connected is probably where the biggest expense is. But once it's in, the ROI is pretty clear. In terms of conversational communication, so it's quite interesting. People are not used to having conversations, and they get quite shocked when they first join MCI, and it's like somebody real is actually talking to you, and it's not just a blast SMS that's a bit of spam that you look at it, ignore, and maybe one day you'll get to it. So in terms of how it's going to help us compete, I guess for us, it's not only just the scalability, so that there is a scalability discussion. If we want to keep adding more students, there aren't enough people to keep adding to support them, and the math doesn't add up. But really, in terms of, just thinking of the sales cycle, for example, and we're just starting to talk about implementing Pendula in the sales cycle, and so that's probably a topical discussion at the moment, because I've thought about it for a while. But really, for us, most of our students are submitting at least 4 inquiries and leads with different providers. And so for us, it's not just how quickly you're getting to those students, but it's how are you getting to them? So are you another 02, 07, 03 number that's calling them? Are you giving them the information that they need? Are they just looking for price? Are they looking to speak to someone? Are they looking to have a consultation? Can we have the consultation not as soon as they submit that, because maybe they're really annoyed with their boss and quickly started firing off all these different inquiries because they want to study something else and leave, but maybe at 4 o'clock or at 1 o'clock at lunchtime when it's better for them. So what are we doing to put ourselves into their shoes and really bring the MCI experience to them, as opposed to just flooding them with brochures and calls and try to call you earlier, here's an email, here's a brochure, get back to me, keep hounding you. What can we be doing different to the 3 other providers that they've also inquired with? And I guess really it's flipping that mentality of this is a sales process, which it is. I don't tell our sales guys otherwise, but let's turn it into a conversation. Let's turn it into the beginning of a relationship. This is a 12 or 18-month process and an engagement that somebody's about to have with us. Let's make it exciting and pleasurable and not painful. And that bloody place calling me again to do my stupid course that I signed up to 11 months ago. Wow, MCI is calling me and I'm so close and I'm about to graduate and this is going to be the best experience of my life. It's flipping that model and that relationship.
Yeah, terrific answer. Surprising them with something they don't expect in a positive way is always wonderful, right? Thank you for that. And thank you both for these great answers. That's all for the questions. Hopefully for all the attendees, you've been some great lessons here and you've learned some stuff. We've talked a little bit about Pendula and other technology, but hopefully you've taken some real kernels of useful advice, lessons, some counsel from our guests today. We do have one last thing to offer you for people that have joined. If you would like to take a close look at Pendula and see for yourself what MCI have used for their student engagement approach, we are offering Pendula for free for a month. And we're also bundling in, thanks to Cloudwerx, a complimentary service blueprinting session that Toby mentioned earlier in the presentation. That's for all webinar attendees. Please feel free to reach out to us and we'll pass on any contact details for both Jenna and for Toby. Thank you everybody for coming, and I hope you have a great morning.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Jenna. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.